Okay, am I live? I don't know if I'm live. I'm testing out this new software. Let's see if this works. I don't have a pause button. Do I have a pause button? What's this? I'm going to pause. Alrighty. Okay, so I'm going to move my little guy over here. This is from David Dickson. David Dickson is a Scottish divine, and he is a great commentator. I use his commentaries all the time. I have a parishioner who wants to go through the book of Romans and has asked me for many commentaries, and I thought this would be a good one to go through, and I would actually read it online on this YouTube stream, and then you can listen along and hear the wisdom of the Scottish divine David Dickson. This is an exposition of all St. Paul's epistles together, so he did all of them with an explanation of other epistles, those other epistles, the apostles, St. James, Peter, John, and Jude. So all the letters, wherein the sense of every chapter and verse is analytically unfolded and the text enlightened. And so let's start. Epistle of Paul to the Romans. Now, some of the text is, this has not been reprinted since it was done with crazy characters and stuff like that. So this is the only copy online. I think it actually has been reprinted, but it's not available. It really isn't available anywhere except for this place online. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it to you and make comments along the way so that perhaps you will be edified by this. And I will pause. I'm using a new piece of software, this UB streamer or whatever, and let's see if it let's see how it works. The Epistle of Paul to the Romans, analytically expounded. The sum of the epistle, the contents of the epistle, in general, the generalization. The apostle determined to visit the Romans that he might by his presence confirm them in the faith. That's why he's writing this letter. In the meantime, when he observes his coming delayed, because his coming is delayed, being moved by the Spirit of the Lord, he writes this famous epistle to them. The parts of the epistle, besides the beginning and the conclusion, are two. There are two main parts. The first shows the only and spiritual ground of sinners' justification by faith in Christ, and that's from chapter 1 to chapter 12. The other part treats concerning the holy course in life which justified persons should live to the end of the chapter, from chapter 12 to the end of the chapter. So, the first part to chapter 12 is justification by faith in Christ, essentially the gospel. The second part, to the end of the chapter, is how we respond to the gospel. That's why this is a crucial letter and should be read by all. That which appertains to the first part, presently, after the beginning of the epistle, the apostle undertakes to prove this: no man can be justified by inherent righteousness, but by the righteousness of Christ only, apprehended by faith alone, and freely of his grace, imputed by God to us that believe. This position he proves by 10 arguments, whereof the 2 first are in the first chapter, the 3rd in the 2nd chapter, and the 7 others are in the 3rd chapter. First 3 chapters of Romans. 10 arguments. To the further fixing of these arguments, he subjoins a 7-fold proof of this doctrine. Okay. So starting in chapter 4, after these 10 arguments about justification by faith alone in Christ alone, he then continues in chapter 4 a 7-fold proof of the doctrine. He provides proofs in the next chapters. So the first is that Abraham was justified by faith alone in chapter 4. The second is that this only reason of our justification affords us comfort against the just anger of God, the original sin, the poison which Adam derived upon us, chapter 5. The third is that this ground of our justification very much conduces to promote sanctification in them that are justified, chapter 6. The fourth is that this ground of our justification only yields comfort to the afflicted consciences of them that are justified upon their imperfect obedience. And the relics, that's great. The relics of sin dwelling in them. Let me repeat that. The ground of our justification only yields comfort to the afflicted consciences of those people who are justified upon their imperfect obedience and the relics of sin dwelling in them. The fifth is that this ground of our justification fences those that are justified and sanctified, not only against condemnation or all the evils to be feared after this life, but also confirms and comforts against all the troubles and afflictions to which the children of God are obnoxious in this life. Chapter 8. The sixth proof is that by experience it is found that the Jews seeking righteousness from their works fall short of it, and that the Gentiles, destitute of all show of inherent righteousness, by faith in Jesus Christ have obtained true and saving righteousness. Chapter 9, where from occasion of the Jews cutting off, election and reprobation is handled. Romans 9, the big chapter about predestination, election, reprobation, all that. The which rejection of the Jews, being apparent and manifest to all the churches because of their foolish incredulity and obstinacy, David Dickson proves to be just. Well, he proves. I think is Paul. Paul proves. David Dickson's writing he. So, yeah, Paul proves to be just. So the rejection of the Jews is just. Chapter 10. Yet all the Jews not to be despised, because the obstinacy of that nation is to last but for a time, which he shows in chapter 11. So the Jews will come after, come back into the fold. In the other part of the epistle, wherein he treats of sanctification in the lives of all those that are justified, 1. After serious ostentation, that all who are justified should consecrate themselves unto God, and all the ministers of the gospel maintaining peace among themselves, every one according to his ability should promote the sanctification and salvation of the faithful. He gives general precepts about sanctity in chapter 12. 2. He descends to more special duties towards the magistrate and their neighbors of all degrees, according to the law of charity, chapter 13. 3. He handles the mutual duties of the faithful in a prudent use of their Christian liberty, chapter 14, and in the former part of chapter 15. Lastly, assuring the Romans of his love and authority in the remaining part of chapter 15, with salutations of the saints, he concludes his epistle, chapter 16. It says the network status is poor. Anyway, that's where I wanted to end, and so I'm ending there. Let's see how this worked.